these days, other than of course Instagram comments and WhatsApp. So do you guys write email? No emails being written by the students also. So writing is pain. Let's be clear. Why is writing pain? I tell you. When I talk here, I mean, it's like I have a flow of my thinking in this presentation, and I have written this presentation with AI, without AI. There's also a help that's coming, etc. But still, it's like some portion of my thinking is right here. But me giving coherence through talking is easier. But the moment I start writing and scripting this talk, right, I find flaws in the argument. Oh, this should not come before this. This should come after this. Oh, this is a problem. Logically, it doesn't seem to connect. What did I tell in the Act 1? What am I telling in Act 2? Oh, Act 1 is not yet over. So it actually creates that problem. So first thing that we have to understand is that communicating research clarifies your thinking. That is the reason why we communicate in the first place. Otherwise, there is no reason to communicate. And communicating research is how science flourishes. In IIT, for example, I have actually personally seen some of those students, brilliant researchers. They keep doing experiment, desk job, and actually have amazing finding and data, and they have found something that is not old finding. It's clearly novel, but they refuse to write. But the guide is not able to let it go. So instead of student writing, the guide is writing the paper, but student has to be co-author. So student becomes co-author. Once the guide writes 3 papers, he simply staplers all 3 together and submits his PhD thesis. He's done, but he has still not communicated anything by himself. It's the guide who has written. Whose PhD it is? So at some point, student has to realize it is his own PhD that he has to do and actually write about it. So that is a third pillar that we are talking about. And if you're not doing it, and there is all chance that the knowledge that was created is actually going to die, and the field is actually going to retract. In the sense, like, it is not going to progress in the way that researcher wants to do, and if you want to take forward a specific area for that matter, like a plasma biology, computational, whatever form that is, right? So now that we know what research is, where is it already broken? And so this is a well-known crisis that is there across the industry and publication industry also. We'll see some of those issues. And one of the first thing is that developers here will understand this. It worked in my test, but it did not work for when you are actually doing it live, for example. Or when I did the experiment, this is how the data came. So you rerun the experiment, the same data is not coming. So replicability becomes a problem for all of this. And in management studies and social sciences, it's even worse. So in none of the studies, we take some data, we write something about. We don't even know if the phenomena data are connected or not. So all sorts of issues are there. And we'll talk on some basic issues around this, right? Before we even assume fraud, so Muthu was talking about ethics, integrity, etc. But we'll assume foolishness, stupidity, laziness first before even assuming something around fraud. So that is basically where we are right now. So this is the first thing that happens. Right? So you are entering a research, and typically in Indian Institute of Science or other universities also. So there are 2 ways to evaluate whether a student is actually geared for research or not. So one, they take up the entire coursework that person, a student has actually done, keep drilling him on that coursework. So one by one, faculty will actually drill him until he breaks. This portion you don't understand. Why don't you go and study this and come back? We'll do this. Or why don't you think about it within that course? So that drilling will happen for 2.5 hours. At the end of it, you have satisfied all of these things. So now that you understand the basic phenomena, basic questions, basic problems, and the extension that is possible and the edges of that course, you are ready for research. That is one way of evaluating. The other way of evaluating is basically somebody in the department assumes or your research faculty that he is going to guide you through the research journey. He'll say write a thesis, write a proposal, also for the thesis. And you have to do, this is the objective, this is the introduction, this is the method, this is the data, this is how I collected, this is what will happen, these are the methods I will apply, this is potentially the results, and how it will be useful and stuff like that. So you go and present it to a panel that is formed at a department level, and they will say yes. So what are the issues here? One, I may not know everything about the coursework, that is for sure. Whoever is evaluating also may not know. So that is one way of doing it. The other side is even worse in the sense like student writes a proposal, and that problem first time everybody in the panel is seeing, and they don't know what the problem is. So you are expecting them to evaluate. So they evaluate the method around it, not necessarily the phenomena around it. So it becomes problematic. So at the end of the PhD journey, it is only a student who is an expert in the problem, nobody else is there. So which means by default, any problem you pick and you are the only person, you are supposed to be given a PhD. Whatever you, that is what it is. So now what goes wrong here, right? So this is the things that can go wrong here. So what, you picked the wrong line of research, in the sense, within my batch, for example, startup failure is a very popular, research area, where I picked startup support. Support is not a very popular area, but I picked, my line of research is, startup support. But failure is much more, providing. They will get gold medal, they will get more papers, they will get more citations, but support is not. But only when you support, failure will be avoided. If you actually don't support it, then failure is more common. So which one should we study? Should we study failure or should we study support? So did I pick the wrong line of research? I don't know. I published papers, so maybe it must have been good. So that is one. I picked the wrong method, and here one of the safety areas that many researchers actually take up these days is I don't know which method to pick, so I'll take a mixed method. In the sense, they are not decided whether it is quantitative, they are not decided it is experimental, they are not decided it is qualitative, so, but they say I'll do mixed method, meaning part of it will be in one method, the second method will also be picked up, they do a PhD with it, and then they'll actually publish that, sort of thing. So that can be one. And the other thing that can become a problem is that the theory that you have taken to explain yourself, right? So that could be wrong. For example, when I was writing my PhD thesis, there were two different theories, like one is the resource theory and another is the institution theory. So I had to actually plan my writing around whichever theory that I am going to adopt. So once I started writing the institution theory side, I figured I was absolutely out of depth. So that's not a theory that I can, write an entire thesis on. I completely felt that. In the sense, after, planning that whole process, I said institution theory is not for me, I'm going to switch the theory. Which means I have to rewrite the entire set of analysis chapters in that theoretical frame and then redo the whole thing. This happens. If you don't even touch 2-3 theories in your own lifetime while writing research thesis, then you have lost an opportunity. That is the main first three problems. This is actually mostly pre-decided, but you are allowed to switch in flexible cases like myself was not bothered about this theory, but as long as it's useful to policy making, he was okay with it. Data progress is not aligning with the expectation. So we make an instrument at least, or if it's experimental work, it's a field work. You get data, and it is obviously subject to all sorts of statistical variations. So if it does not, really, meet your expectations, then you are worried. And reporting that results back to the date week after week after doing experiment is not a great thing to do. And there itself you are feeling that hey, this whole PhD thing and research thing is not for me type. So that is exactly what happens. And you can add, more things. You have pressure to finish. Like for example, 5th year your scholarship starts. 6th year you have to leave hostel. 3rd year if you don't submit your colloquium complete result, then it's a problem. All sorts of this thing is there. So you sort of cut corners. You say that hey, that's okay if I do it this way. I'm fine to be lazy this way. All students do this. Why don't I do it also? That sort of thing. And in many cases, they actually sort of hide behind. I don't have to disclose the data, so I can write anything about it. I just have to give the analysis. So people are able to figure out what is actually being fraud here, and based on the data that you disclose. And so Anon's razor is basically telling that only. In most cases, you can attribute whatever this thing to not to balance really or ill will for that matter, but it's mostly explained by stupidity. In a sense, what you think is novel in your own research, right? So that need not be novel. You are so badly read in that specific field, you think everything that you are seeing from AI is super novel, but that's not the case. And if your professor is very old, maybe you can sort of escape that. If your professor is also well read like mine, there is no way you can escape that. So you're obviously going to get caught very well within the department itself, and you can't bluff your way. So and so this is also another problem with respect to incentives, and that leads people to do certain things wrongly. And I think broadly attributed to Charlie Munger, who said, "Show me your incentives, I'll tell you your behavior," and that's obviously what is the incentive cost bias that is out there. But what we mean by incentives is what drives behavior and what is the outcome that we are expecting from it. For example, there are both the students and faculty here. So faculty is evaluated for pass percentage, student feedback, utility, fit and finish to industry, keeping the subject contemporary and relevant, and of course evaluation quality and stuff like that. But at a college level, it is probably placement record, ranking, rating, and piece income that they have. They have pressure to grow the college to other departments and stuff like that. So what you do see here is that what the student expectation, what the faculty expectation, what the institution expectation, all seem to be going in completely different directions. And student wants to do nothing, get out with this degree and a very well paying job, and probably get a girlfriend also along the way. So this is basically the expectation that the student has. Faculty wants good salary, doesn't want to teach, doesn't want to do research, doesn't want to update anything with respect to their own knowledge. College doesn't want to invest in infrastructure. College doesn't want to, recruit research faculty. But they want to be on top of the rankings. They want to be able to, garner the highest fees and stuff like that. Meaning, everybody has reasons to be totally lazy, and that's what we are also seeing, right? So it's common, for that sort of tension to remain, and this, in a fashionable way, we call it as ambidextrity. Ambidextrity is basically trying to go in two different directions or trying to operate in two different directions when you can operate only in one. And this is also coming with a path difference in the sense, like, if you are historically a graduation, sort of a college, it is suddenly not possible to become a research-oriented university in like 2 years' time. That's not possible. And research university suddenly cannot become teaching university. Like that problem is happening in IIT, for example. So all that is a issue for us, and this is obviously coming from the incentives that we have at different levels. And now we come to the fraud part. And this is Dan Ariely. He's a behavioral economist, and he's part of this Duke University's faculty group actually. And he does I don't know if you have heard about these books, irrational behaviors and stuff like that. So he writes about honesty, dishonesty, and stuff like that. So one of these papers that he wrote was so in the insurance policy, right, when you take the policy, every page you sign in the bottom. So if you switch the signature from the bottom to the top, the disclosure quality is going to better. That is what is the theory that he built, and he published a paper on it, and that was cited several times. But they run the experiment that he had done previously on proving this part, meaning whether people will disclose honestly about their own sickness, their own history of accidents and stuff like that while taking insurance if they sign first. That was the whole thing about honest disclosures. That paper's data was fabricated, so he gets caught, and that paper was pulled down, and the co-authors themselves basically sort of disowned the paper. Hey, I didn't expect it to become this way, and this was done, and it was actually a fraud. I mean, this is like irony, right? I mean, the guy is an expert in irrational behavior and honesty, and he publishes a paper in which he himself commits a fraud. And why does he do it? What is the motivation behind it? Can you guys imagine what is the motivation? Any answers? Do you guys understand the story? Any questions on the story? So this is a professor who researches honesty, writes a paper with dishonest data, and gets caught. This is the story. Right? Why do you think he did it? That is the question he asked. Go ahead, raise your hand and answer this question. Why do you think people do these things?
He was testing the system whether it is working.
Oh yeah, the system's definitely working then, so that is proven. Any other reasons that you can claim?
Did he admit that mistake after getting caught?
Yes, there is no other option for him other than so he had to admit and retract the paper, and that's obviously dishonest paper. Yeah. So he has built his sort of standing by the theories that he generated, and if he thinks that the previous theory that he had given is disproved by the new data, then the previous thing that he had showed, written books and given talks will become meaningless. So his own moral standing and theoretical standing etc. will go down. But when in the face of data saying one thing and theory saying another, which one will you change? So we as researchers, we are only worried about two things: data and theory. So data is telling one thing. In this case, it said something, and theory is the other. Which one will you change? Can you change the data? You cannot change the data. If you change the data, it is fraud. You should change the theory, but he is married to a theory, so he is not able to change his theory. So he is committing to a fraud. So that is basically the option that we are seeing as researchers. This is a core problem of where fraud is arising, and this is important because you guys are starting afresh and maybe researching in the first few papers or maybe the second 10 papers or whatever in your career. May not be that relevant, but if you're published like hundreds of papers, then some maybe it's valued more. From a career perspective, you probably don't want to change that thing for yourself. So this is the last part of my talk, and here we want to talk about. So where did we begin? We started the talk with why do research, and then we went about what is already broken, and that we figured out portions where it is broken, and what has AI changed at this point in time. And some of the examples are common to what Muthu had shared previously also is that we'll come to some of those examples, similar but different examples in a different area. So several of the processes, right? So whether the expertise on methods, expertise on writing, summarizing, topic extraction, synthesizing other research, everything is reduced to a click of a button. And whether you set up Claude code, whether you ask ChatGPT, whether you write agents, it doesn't really matter. Anything that you want to be written, is already written, and all these AI companies have pretty much indexed all available printed data, journal papers, open source code, available newspaper articles, Wikipedia, everything is inside their training and post training also happens. So it's an expert in everything basically. So that's basically what it is. And how should we respond to the question? And the three ways in which academia actually has responded is the following. One is the anti-AI stance, and in the sense that's a stance that Muthu is also alluding towards, as in I'm anti-AI. If you're wanting to apply your mind and actually become good researchers, then really apply your mind, really learn, figure out what the methods are, go to the lectures and figure it out. This is common, in Nordic schools where they have banned digital devices, especially in the ages of 2 to 11, 12, before reaching teenage. After that, they get a right to device, but that initial age when they had devices in the schools, learning outcomes had fallen in the Nordic schools, so they are actually banning that entire device and going back to regular whiteboard and teaching methods that are physical in nature. I think Reddy University, where my son is studying, so I have sort of a personal experience there. Complete anti-AI stance, in the sense, if you are given an assignment and you are asked to do it in, say, R, you are supposed to do it in R, and whatever code generation, etc., you may do, but if the output that is supposed to take a form of a report, and you are supposed to write the report. You're not supposed to go to ChatGPT, give your R results, and ask it to write the report and give the question and figure out what ways to write it. And in his class, typically it's a group assignment, right? So there are groups that are still, sort of committed to use AI and not get caught. This is common, right? So how many, students, your names will not be taken, but if you are open to giving this vote, if there is an opportunity to cheat and nobody is going to get caught, you cheat in an exam. You're not going to get caught. Would you? If there are people, no, you're not. Okay, so this is actually called as a social desirability bias. In the sense, I'm in front of my faculty, and this external faculty is coming and asking me if I will cheat in my exam or not. What does he expect? Raising hands, no way it's happening. So socially, it's desirable to be honest about this out here. Absolutely understandable. But the students, of course, Lazy being lazy in the sense, if it is possible to just do this and submit this assignment and get it generated by AI and not get marked by the professor. So they will figure out what evaluation tool the faculty uses. They will figure out from Reddit channels, subreddits, which tools will actually break that tool. And what if I run it with 3 different tools in a series? What if I also add spelling mistakes and also add my own unnecessary sentences in between? What if I change the adjectives? What if I use a completely different type of dictionary? Can I set this up based on past assignments? All work they will do. To do what? To automatically generate one research report that will probably take them 3 hours to do, right? They would spend more time in trying to cheat the system than actually do the work. And this is one of those very old time stories. Maybe you would have heard a version of this previously also. A very beautiful student goes to a slightly older male faculty member that she's failing the midterm 1, midterm 2, and she's willing to do anything to pass the examination. And she's with the faculty, and the faculty asks her, "Would you do the one thing that I asked you to do?" Then the student is of course all willing. She is all ears. And the faculty says, "Go study." Right? So this is very important, thing in the sense like you're willing to do everything else other than actually studying just to pass that, sort of thing. So that is the stance that anti-AI basically means. Also in manners that Muthu is talking about, in the sense, is it related to something that you want to protect from an IPR perspective? So that's a different type of team. Pro-AI stance is something that you are standing with the AI industry that certain jobs, for example, I don't know if you are aware of this, medical schools entrance examination, for example, you get the top marks. 2 areas that are picked up very highly. One is radiology and other is skincare. The reasons are very simple. Radiology means that you can sit in one place and don't have to go anywhere. Things will come to you, you have to read and give comments, and then you are considered a doctor. You don't have to go to OT, you don't have to do MD type, you don't have to give prescription, nothing. Report comes, you sign, you just verify. The other is skin. Skin also, emergency conditions will not come. There is no trauma case, there is no surgery, there is no treatment, etc. Skin only. If some split end is there in your hair, for me nothing. So, but I'm saying that is not a concern with respect to life death. They prefer that, and it pays very well. So with AI, for example, radiology is obviously getting automated a lot. And people who are radiologists for like 30 years, 20 years are finding that their job is getting replaced. Similarly, if you look at IT industry, development, software developers are being paid a lot. And that too, front-end guys were actually paid a lot. So front-end is one of the first things that got automated with AI. And industry is for AI because they are able to immediately change whatever front-end that they want and do that. And very few universities actually have this pro AI stance. What is the stance here? Are you guys okay with submitting AI assignments, AI homework? How's the how many faculty is okay with students submitting AI made homework assignments? Please raise your hands. Please raise 1, 2. You are okay with it. Anybody else? You are okay with students submitting AI? So majority is still anti-AI in that manner, and they probably have reasons around it. I don't know the vote in the online, but I'm assuming that it's going to be a similar sort of a thing. But the most common stance is no AI stance. Meaning, I don't know, whether you student uses or not. They are in a completely different territory from our understanding of AI perspective, and this is a stance that is the most common. Even ISC did a committee to study what is about AI and how should we respond, etc. But really, there is no stance. And last semester, I had 80 students in my classroom. And most of them submitted AI assignments, and I was actually very irritated. How am I supposed to make entrepreneurs out of people who are submitting AI assignments? And I'm actually going from pro AI stance to anti AI stance for next semester. So I'm actually very irritated by what the students did with my assignments. Okay. And this is something that is also Dr. Muthu spoke about this, and this is actually very true. Everywhere you have looked for corruption, we found it. And this is a person who's the co-founder of this initiative called Broken Science Initiative, and they track where all in science and paper publication and stuff like that. So That is one. Other thing is also with respect to references, particularly medical references, for example, top journals. Yeah, journal editors themselves are not able to sort of tell that, hey, we can vouch for what is actually being reviewed in our journal and is worthwhile, and we can trust and make a decision based on that. And if journal editors are telling that, then it is completely sort of broken. And Supreme Court is something that in the previous session also it was told. Two, three things are getting fabricated here. What is fabricated? The case reference is getting fabricated. There was no such case. That citation is getting fabricated. There was no such citation in that case. And, okay, citation also is okay, but it's telling that somebody in that, case, the citation, then the actual, citation, then precedent, then the paragraph, everything is broken. How am I supposed to make a judgment? It's becoming a problem for us. And we do have judges who are willing to see videos on court. So all sorts of, negative things are coming from there. That said, we do have so enough number of rules. I didn't want this to actually become a sort of a session with respect to what tools to use for what and stuff like that. So I just organized the tool to be sort of useful to you, but there are edges to this also. So for example, I'll not cover the entire set, but maybe things that will be useful to you. Consensus is actually telling you where are some evidence is there and strength of evidence, for example. That's something that you want to track it. But it could actually have synthesized answer without ever reading the underlying papers. So this is actually a problem because you think there is evidence that is very strong coming from consensus, and there are a lot of people accepting a specific consensus. Like for example, curcumin cures cancer. So you basically do a search for that. Suppose if it is far, you get sort of a thing, but you've not read the underlying paper. It's a problem for you. Similarly, if you look at lit maps that is there in the bottom, for example, you could actually see the citation network, and you could figure out who's the most influential author, etc. Just because you saw a map doesn't mean you understand. During my PhD days, when such tools were not available, even while presentation was going and I felt a specific paper has to be cited in that context, I was able to do along with the author's name and the year and what is the paper actually telling from memory, in the sense while talking you are able to cite the paper because you have read the paper a number of times and be able to cite it in context. Whereas in a lit map type of situation, you only seen a map and that's not the territory, and the paper you have not read. It's very difficult to cite it in context. So that's a problem. And several of these tools, for example, requires you to apply judgment on the base data. So if that is basically required, then what am I doing here? So what you should actually, the way you should think about it is, there is a lot of drudge work, in the sense like very repetitive tasks that is there in every research process, like whether it is setting up your equipment, for example. It's a very repetitive sort of a work. Similarly, reading papers is a very repetitive type of work. Actually noting down, finding table in a standard format is a drudge type of work. You automate those work, but you still have to read and judge for yourself. So in the sense that the mechanical, non-cognitive, not much thinking required type of a task that is there, try and automate most of it with AI. And what is actually useful for you to think through, make a judgment, understand it, make sense, find patterns, figure a new insight, etc. For that, you still have to, do that independent reading, do that, judgment, actually go through the, background, etc. So all of that is required. And what happens is that the student actually picks up only why it is useful and not do anything with respect to the right. So if he is not doing anything on the right, what is going to happen is that it's a slightly intelligent faculty or slightly intelligent journal reviewer or judge for that matter, you're going to get caught. That is obviously a very bad thing. But if you do the automation bit with AI and still do a reasonable job with respect to judgment and put that effort in, you're actually in good hands. That's something that I would suggest as a safe way to operate in the AI world. So this is actually on the look at this. This is actually on the paper reading side, synthesis side, literature side, whereas this is actually on the data analysis, polish, writing, feedback, etc. So it's actually going through in that research workflow itself, right? So some of these are actually very useful, and I found some of these are able to do end to end. In the sense, you give a proposition and ask it to do the touch work, and then go back to each one of those and what is written, and then redo that. Problem for me is actually if I change a specific insight in my idea, what changes in that is completely regeneration, not a delta change. Suppose you review it here, faculty, for example, he will change only one portion, and you will see the effect happening prior and after, and then how it is actually flowing. You are able to see the full part. In AI, you change one input, the whole output is actually changing. That doesn't make sense to me, because what it basically assumes is that human time that is available to review what is coming as output from AI is infinite. We don't have that much time. So we want to know that if I change an input, what exactly changes in my output. So that's something that you could be focused on. So that's something that needs a new tool probably, but I guess that will also come through. But most of them actually handle the full cycle. And this is the full cycle talks about like Future House, for example. It's a complete pipeline of agents doing everything from literature review to meta learning to analysis and the writing and actually writing it. Maybe you should give a co-author thing to Future House for everything that is generated from there. And like how Muthu had told previously, is that I'll give you full slide. So entire slide will be available to you. You can take a picture if you want. That's easier. Oh yeah. So undetectable AI, for example, like how he was mentioning to humanize, and to humanize is very easy because you can humanize like a Sashi Tharoor, for example. You can humanize like a Narendra Modi, for example. Many different ways to humanize it, and undetectable does it in one. And over a period, that will also be caught, and you need to figure out another tool. The thing that I realized, at least it's a very sensitive sort of a personal realization, is that the moment you start evaluating tools like these in like dozens, what occurs to you is that maybe it is time that the student will write a tool for himself, and with the help of AI. So, for example, in this case, if you already know how a faculty evaluates assignments and gives you scores, and there's the rubric already available to you, you will be able to write a better eval as a student and figure out how best to respond to a specific assignment. If you know how a journal editor is actually going to make a judgment on whether to pass and allow for publication in that specific journal, then maybe you write a better eval for the output that is getting generated with your own tool. So this proliferation of tools with AI is not stopping anytime soon, and I think it's all going to get very, very personal at some point in time, and it's a matter of time that students will write their own tools for doing this. And we personally, at least in Spirea, we use Direct Archive, which is a journal collator, and Semantic Scholar. So we consume APIs directly from there, and we build our own tools, and we find better groundedness in the research output that we are doing, and we are very, very concerned about the output quality that is coming from our systems, and that is the path that we are going down, at least internally. And some of these are important. The undetectable AI type of deal, or citation checks and grounding, for example, that's something that we are able to do ourselves also. So this is the final question. If everything is done by AI, what is left from a research perspective? As I said, give the drudgery type of work to AI, and do the interesting type of work to yourself. Unfortunately, AI at this point is creating art, but not washing vessels and washing clothes. So maybe it's a combination that will be useful at some point in time. But what I'm trying to tell here is that the frontier model will obviously be able to push most of the human difficulty, high difficulty problems like a math Olympiad problem, for example, medical school entrance exams, for example. All of those it's able to pass. But who's there to do the real work? And that's What makes distinctly a PhD a distinct human achievement is your ability to think through, and that is basically how we close it. Is that you should actually look at building, your own learning and curiosity, ability to understand evidence and its strength, especially when there are uncertainties coming in from different places. Ability to think independently and communicate the findings, and ability to read and evaluate others' work. That's what we are focused on as learning, and I don't think many universities are handling any rubric for that. Any university is actually able to evaluate in a classroom as to is my student able to do this at the end of my course, and if it is specific to that subject, is he able to do better or not? What it shouldn't be, of course, that's something that is very clear, at least that we are not paper machines, and so we can't be generating like that. And we are not unpaid labor as a researcher also for some lab to which we don't even relate, and we don't have any incentive to be doing. That's so the thing that we want and thing that we don't want, sort of clear with or without AI. And that's where I will close the talk. I'll take questions now.
Have we stayed in this?
Which one? The tools. Some of the tools are paid, but most of them are actually free. Yeah, several are actually paid. Like these are paid. Yeah, some of these are paid. Some of these here is also paid. Yeah. The semantic scholar archive is free. Any questions? Looks like it was a very big monologue on my own experiences, but happy to hear your questions and reflections if you have any. Yeah.
In one of those slides, you have the parameters, for colleges, for students, so the initial slide.
Yeah.
There was one line which is fit to industry.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So how much of that is really happening? If you look at the research, it's all theoretical.
Yeah.
It's adding knowledge, but it is not fit.
Yeah.
Nothing is fit to the industry.
Correct. So, the point that you're trying to tell is valid, and that is one of the reasons why some of these industry folks like Infosys has a massive Mysore facility for training, and they take up from whatever base knowledge that they have and train for a specific industry. And universities also start new courses. For example, back in 2016, when digital marketing was just picking up in India, JSS was actually starting an MBA in digital marketing. So that fit comes from, for example, this college offering BTech in AI, for example, it's obviously a step towards fit. Entire course itself is fit towards what the demand is, not necessarily from a one-to-one type of a team.
My question is more from the research perspective. How
Yeah.
much of the research is fit to the industry?
No, research is not necessarily geared to fit, and the reason is actually simple because science progressing versus economy progressing need not be related. In the sense, me studying incubator and having some sort of evidence for how best incubation could work, etc., may not be interesting to the government. So that's different. Similarly, if you're doing, say photography work, that may not be relevant to industry at this point in time. Maybe they have already moved on to something else. But what you are actually prepared is, can I think independently? Can I operate in a specific area? Is my understanding of the area, crux and core that can actually operate to a large, variety of problems in that area? That much itself is a good fit. Not necessarily one problem to the other, but probably a broad brush on, area, attack, how I can actually operate, and that capability is actually very, very useful. So that is what I would say. Any other questions? Okay. So then we close. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Respected speaker, thank you for the very informative session. You have highlighted how we can use the AI tools stage by stage in our research. On behalf of our Institute of Engineering and Management Sciences, we are very grateful to you, sir, for spending your valuable time and knowledge with us. Please give him a big round of applause. Now I request Dr. Mahatesh Matapati, Professor of the CSC Department, to present a small gift to Dr. Murali Loganathan as a token of love, gratitude and appreciation on behalf of Amrita Institute of Engineering and Management Science. Once again, we are very grateful to you, sir. Now we have a lunch break of half an hour. After that, at 1 p.m., we will going to have a panel discussion with the same speakers who have spoken in the morning. I request everyone to assemble in the auditorium exactly at 1 p.m. Thank you.
One more thing, actually today's speaker, Dr. Kumar Swami sir and Murali Loganathan sir, actually supported by our Prabhavati madam from VTPC. We are special thanks to Prabhavati madam for supporting us in getting a good speakers to this particular program. And on the absence here, I am thanking her for the support and thank both the speakers. Thank you.